Hello everyone, and welcome back to another collector's guide. Today, we will be covering the third set in the Pokemon TCG, Fossil. Fossil was released on October 10th, 1999, and contains 62 cards. It, alongside Jungle, make up some of the shorter sets in the Pokemon TCG, and came in a first edition print run and an unlimited print run. First, we'll be taking a look at the booster boxes. Currently, a first edition booster box goes for about $14,000 to $15,000, whereas an unlimited booster box goes for about $8,000 to $10,000. There are also two theme decks that coincided with the release of Fossil: the Lockdown theme deck and the Bodyguard theme deck, both which go for about $150. Moving on to the blister packs. There are no first edition blister packs. However, a unlimited blister pack goes for about $250 to $390. As for booster packs, a first edition Fossil booster pack will run you about $300, whereas an unlimited booster pack will run you for about $175. Now that we've gotten the products out of the way, we can move on to the holographics. The first holographic in this set is the Aerodactyl. A PSA 10 first edition Aerodactyl goes for about $791, whereas a PSA 9 goes for about $98 and a PSA 8 for $66. So there's a pretty steep drop off after a PSA 10, with the PSA 9 difference being about $600. Pretty drastic. As for the unlimited side of things, again, the PSA 10 goes for about $632, PSA 9 for $56, and a PSA 8 for $45. Again, there is a huge drop off between a 10 and a 9. However, the price between a 9 and an 8 isn't that bad, so if you have one that's in pretty good shape, I think it's worth getting graded. As for a raw version of the card, a first edition Near Mint Aerodactyl goes for about $63, and in the unlimited print run, it goes for about $20. The next card in this set is the Articuno. A PSA 10 first edition holographic Articuno goes for about $2,570. A PSA 9 goes for about $285, and a PSA 8 goes for about $135. Again, there is a huge difference between a PSA 10 and a PSA 9. So if you really want to maximize your profits on this card, I wouldn't grade it unless you're 100% sure you're going to get a PSA 10. As for the unlimited side of things, the PSA 10 will get you about $610, a PSA 9 about $86, and a PSA 8 $50. When it comes to the ungraded version of this card, a first edition will run you about $124, again in near mint condition, and an unlimited $26. So there is a huge disparity between the prices of the first edition and unlimited versions of this card. The next holographic in this set is the Ditto holographic. A PSA 10 first edition Ditto will get you about $770, a PSA 9 $105, and a PSA 8 $61. As for the unlimited version of this card, a PSA 10 will run you about $200, a PSA 9 $55, and a PSA 8 $35. When it comes to the raw, ungraded version of the card, a first edition Near Mint holographic Ditto will run you about $67, and the unlimited version will run you about $21. So the disparity between the unlimited and first edition in this card aren't as large as the Articuno. Moving on to our next card, we have the Dragonite holographic, which I believe to be probably the most popular card in the set. It's definitely my favorite card of the set, I'll say that much. The PSA 10 First edition holographic Dragonite runs you about $4,800. The PSA 9, $540, and the PSA 8, $290. As for the unlimited version of this card, the PSA 10 will run you about $1,600, a PSA 9, $157, and a PSA 8, $116. Looking at the raw version of these cards, a first edition near mint holographic Dragonite will run you about $150, and the unlimited version will run you about $67. The next card in this set is the Gengar holographic. A first edition PSA 10 Gengar holographic goes for about $3,187 in the PSA 10. In the PSA 9, it goes for about $435, and for PSA 8, it goes for about $223. As for the unlimited version of this card, the PSA 10 goes for about $1,344, the PSA 9, $182, and a PSA 8 for $66. When it comes to the raw version of this card, a first edition near mint Gengar holographic goes for about $235, and an unlimited Gengar holographic goes for about $56. Again, this card is one of the more popular cards in this set, and there's a pretty large gap here between the raw first edition price and the raw unlimited price. That also goes for the graded version of this card as well, seeing a $2,000 difference in the PSA 10 versus the PSA seeing a $2,000 difference in the first edition PSA 10 and the unlimited PSA 10. Haunter is the next holographic in this set. A PSA 10 first edition Haunter holographic goes for about $475, PSA 9, $118, and a PSA 8, $61. The PSA 10 unlimited goes for about $333, PSA 9 goes for about $48, and a PSA 8 goes for about $82. I think what happened was there probably hasn't been a sale for a PSA 9 in a while. I would assume that the price would probably be much higher. It'd probably be around $80, given that the first edition goes for about $118. I think the PSA 8 selling for $82 might be a fluke. Again, most of these sales come from auctions, and auctions can have some pretty wonky results, so I wouldn't take it too much to heart. When it comes to the raw version of this card, the first edition print run goes for about $68 in a near mint condition, and the unlimited goes for about $20 in a near mint condition. The next holographic in this set is the Hitmonlee. The first edition PSA 10 Hitmonlee goes for about $819, PSA 9 about $100, and PSA 8 for $50. As for the unlimited version of this card, PSA 10 goes for about $716, the PSA 9 $61, and the PSA 8 $38. As for the ungraded version of this card, a first edition goes for about $67 in a near mint condition, and the unlimited goes for about $20 in a near mint condition. Next we have the Hypno holographic. The PSA 10 Hypno holographic in a first edition goes for about $405, PSA 9 for $97, and PSA 8 for $46. As for the unlimited version of this card, the PSA 10 goes for $305, the PSA 9 for $41, and the PSA 8 for $22. As for the ungraded version of this card, the first edition goes for about $51, and the unlimited for $17. Kabutops is the next card in this set. The first edition PSA 10 Kabutops goes for about $477, the PSA 9 for $128, and the PSA 8 for $51. The unlimited version of this card, the PSA 10 goes for about $501, the PSA 9 for 57, and the PSA 8 for 46. As for the ungraded version of this card, the first edition goes for about $62, and the unlimited goes for about $16. Next up, we have Lapras. The first edition PSA 10 Lapras goes for about $3,500, the PSA 9 for about $200, and the PSA 8 for about $110. For the unlimited version of this card, the PSA 10 goes for about $606, the PSA 9 for $60, and the PSA 8 for $36. For the ungraded version of this card, the first edition in a near mint condition goes for about $80, and the unlimited goes for about $10 in a near mint condition. Following this, we have Magneton. The first edition PSA 10 Magneton goes for about $350, the PSA 9 $66, and the PSA 8 $45. As for the unlimited version of this card, the PSA 10 goes for about $135, the PSA 9 $44, and the PSA 8 $25. As for the ungraded version of this card, the first edition goes for about $38, and the unlimited goes for about $9. So there's a pretty big disparity when it comes to Magneton. I always remembered it being one of the less popular holographics from this set, probably because the Magneton already had a holographic in base set, and I think that one was a bit more popular than this. Now we have our second legendary bird, Moltres. In the first edition print run, a PSA 10 goes for about $1,025, PSA 9 $173, and a PSA 8 $99. The prices for this Moltres kind of surprised me a little bit. I always thought that the legendary birds were extremely popular, so I'm kind of shocked to see that the Gengar and the Dragonite and even the Articuno go for a lot more than the Moltres does. I guess out of the three legendary birds, Moltres is the least popular, so I guess it kind of makes sense. As for the unlimited version of this card, the PSA 10 goes for about $350, PSA 9 for $72, and the PSA 8 for $54. For the ungraded version of this card, the first edition goes for about $175, and the unlimited for $33. Next up, we have the Muck. This holographic is probably going to be one of the cheaper ones, just because I know that the Muck was in one of the theme decks for this set. So, the first edition PSA 10 Muck goes for about $305, the PSA 9 for $66, and the PSA 8 for $45. For the unlimited print run, the PSA 10 goes for $84, the PSA 9 for $33, and the PSA 8 also for $33. For the ungraded version, the first edition in near mint goes for $30, and for the unlimited, $3.50. This is probably the largest gap we've seen between a first edition and an unlimited, but that's definitely due to the fact that you could get the unlimited in a theme deck, so we didn't have to try to open it in a pack. Now we move on to the final two cards in the set, first being the Raichu holographic in a PSA 10 first edition. The Raichu goes for about $840 in a PSA 9, $160, and in a PSA 8, $73. As for the unlimited version of this card, the PSA 10 goes for about $462, the PSA 9 for about $90, and the PSA 8 for $45. As for the ungraded version of these cards, a first edition goes for about $64, and the unlimited for $22. The last holographic in the set, we have the Zapdos, who I think is probably the most popular of the three legendary birds, given that it appeared in two of the sets so far, in base set and also in fossil. The base set card being more expensive than the fossil card, but in my opinion the fossil looking a little bit more interesting than the base set card. The PSA 10 first edition Zapdos holographic goes for about $1,025, a PSA 9 for $173, and a PSA 8 for about $136. As for the unlimited side of things, a PSA 10 goes for about $400, a PSA 9, $52, and a PSA 8, $38. The ungraded version of this card in the first edition run goes for $75, and the unlimited $15. I hope you enjoyed going over Fossil with me. I think Fossil and Jungle kind of make a really nice pair, especially when you go over the holographics. I think there's a really good mix of Pokemon and holo patterns between the two sets, and I think these two sets together make a great complement to base set. In the next video, we'll be moving on to the next set of cards,